We're halfway through the month of May, and it's time to give a nice little update on our sub battle with the Chiefs report. Luckily, we got off to a good start. We're up by 26 subscribers. But hit that sub button right now for daily Miami Dolphins content. And if anything happens around the team, we'll have you covered. So join the channel and let's take down the Chiefs. The Miami Dolphins 2025 schedule got announced on Wednesday afternoon, and after looking it over, some more information has been presented to me, and I actually believe the Dolphins got one of the most favorable schedules in the NFL, and arguably, if you are someone who wants the Dolphins to make the playoffs, which I think that's everybody, they got blessed when it came to the 2025 schedule. And I'll give a quick overview and then go into the deep parts of it here. But why did the Dolphins get blessed? Well, when you look at their net rest days in comparison to their opponents and themselves, they are in a massive positive. They have a late bye week, which I believe helps Miami. I know there's different beliefs out there. I'll explain my side of the story later. But I also believe the favorable beginning part of the schedule is helpful for the Fins as well. But we're going to start with the rest days, and that's the more topic that we're going to talk about here, because when you look across every single schedule out there for 2025 and you look at the NFL net rest days, these are the 5 most positive teams. The Detroit Lions are leading the way with 13 days in the positive, but you see it. The Miami Dolphins are the second most net positive team with 11 days in their favor. And there are so many different statistics that tell you the more rest you get, the better you will have of a season, assuming that you yourself can stay healthy. And one of the reasons why it's so impactful for the Fins is that mini bye weeks are huge. What are mini bye weeks? Well, obviously you get your one bye week where you are off for an entire week. But the mini bye weeks is when you play on a Thursday night game and then play on the following Sunday against a team that just has one normal week, right? Because you play on Thursday, you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday through Saturday, right? Well, the other team, they just get Monday through Saturday. So you get 3 days of rest on your opponent. And it's super helpful. And you see here with the number on screen, teams that over the last couple of years have had, or last decade, I should say, plus 0.48 points per game when you have a mini bye and your opponent does not. So it's very minuscule, but it does add points to your favor due to the ability to be more rested, have more fresh legs, and ultimately able to game plan more times against your opponent. And if you are paying attention to the schedule, the Dolphins have 2 Thursday night games, which is pretty significant. I think the Cowboys have 4, which is setting a record for Thursday games. That includes Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then 2 standard Thursday night games. Miami has 2. Week 3 against the Bills and Week 9 against the Ravens. 2 tough opponents, but it allows them to get more preparation, more rest for their opponents the following week and Week 4 and Week 10. And there's more to it just other than the mini buys, right? When you look at that net rest advantage, which Miami has the second highest net in the entire NFL, teams with that net rest advantage have a slight edge. In 2023, this is 2 seasons ago, the teams with a net rest advantage had a 52% win percentage, 55 to 51, which very minimal. It's not like it's the craziest thing in the world, but it does just continue to showcase that if you are lucky enough to have the net rest advantage for the course of the season, it helps your legs stay fresher, helps prevent injuries, gives you more time to game plan in those specific weeks, and it gives you just a very minimal edge to help you have a better season. We're going to continue the conversation here, but are you agreeing with me? Did the NFL bless the Dolphins by giving them a little bit of an easier schedule in compared to their traveling, the rest, the whole 9 yards? Type Y for yes or type N for no. Well, regardless of what you think, one thing is very clear, and it's that the Miami Dolphins can use every inch of help they can get following a bad 8-9 season last year where they had the easiest record schedule in all of football based off their opponent's win percentage. They should have been able to make the playoffs if it wasn't for Tua missing 6 games and leaving the team out to dry with Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, and Tim Boyle. And if you look at the net rest advantage Miami has this year, it's a nice contrast from what happened last season. And although they had the easiest schedule based off win percentage of their opponents, the Dolphins were a -8 in rest differential in 2024, which ranked as the 8th worst net differential in the entire NFL. So I do think the NFL realizes what it does at times, and like they look last year in the teams that had some of the worst net differential, like the 49ers. They were the worst last season. This year, they're in the top 5 of positive net rest. So I think it flips every year, if we're going to be honest, to some degree. But it is nice to have a very positive rest differential in comparison to last year when they didn't. So, some of you are asking, which games do the Dolphins have that advantage in? These are the 3 biggest advantages against the Jets, Bills, and Saints. Why? Well, they play the Jets on Monday Night Football. They get a 3-day rest advantage because they are playing the week prior on Thursday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. So they get a full almost week and a half to prepare for that week 4 game at home against the Jets, a game that they should absolutely win, by the way. Another one that is absolutely massive, week 10 against Buffalo. Now, unfortunately, the Dolphins do play the Ravens the week prior on Thursday Night Football, but they are getting 3 days of rest up on Buffalo because the Bills play that Sunday, so the Dolphins get Friday, Saturday, Sunday to rest and game plan compared to the Bills not being able to have that. Hopefully that will ultimately allow the Dolphins to get a win at home against Buffalo, something they have not been able to do for quite a while. Then they have a full 7-day advantage against the Saints because the Dolphins have a week 12 bye following their week 11 game against the Commanders in Madrid, Spain. The Saints are playing in week 12, so they do not have a rest advantage at all. So you get a full extra 7 days in between your game to the Saints game in comparison to New Orleans. So a team that is very bad in the Saints, it should be at home. Pretty easy game to win if you're Miami in week 13. Now, there are 2 games that the Dolphins have negative rest advantage in. That is in week 5 against Carolina, in week 16 at home against the Bengals. Now, the reasons is because these games are following Monday Night Football games. So you're down a game in comparison to these 2 teams playing that Sunday afternoon. That Bengals game is coming after the Week 15 on the road game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Panthers game coming after you are playing the New York Jets at home, where you do have a positive rest advantage in that one. I will say it might impact you down the stretch in Week 16 against the Bengals, but against the Panthers, you should be able to still take advantage of winning that game. But it's good to see. Dolphins have 3 big advantages. They only have 2 minuscule disadvantages for this upcoming season. More discussion here on the Dolphins schedule, but make sure you get your Dolphins hoodies right now. Clearance, more than half off, $40 off when you go to chatsports.com/Dolphins hoodie. Links in the description and comments of today's video. Never too early to get your Dolphins gear, and when the fall and winter is approaching, you're going to want these hoodies. One more time, chatsports.com/Dolphins hoodie. All right, let's transition a segue from the rest talk to the late bye week discussion, because some people want middle of the year, which is probably the most ideal, right? A week 8, a week 7, where you get a solid stretch of games under your belt, get that halfway point, and then go to the later half of the season. But I actually like having a week 12 bye. Now, that's the second to last week you can have a bye, because you can't have a bye later than week 14. So that's the last week you can have one. You don't have a week 13 bye because that's Thanksgiving week, and nobody has a bye during that week in the NFL. So you have the second to last bye week in the National Football League this year. And it's a double-edged sword. It is. Now, this isn't really statistically proven to a degree, but it's pretty common sense. Teams with a late bye oftentimes suffer more injuries earlier in the season. Think about this. The Dolphins will be playing 11 straight weeks in the NFL before they have a break. It's going to make you have a higher chance of suffering injuries and having players miss games because there is not an extended portion of time to potentially be able to rest and recover and heal up from those injuries. But if you have a late bye week, it allows you to get a late 2-week stretch where you have 2 weeks to rest, prepare, kind of hit that reset button, and maybe finish the year stronger, rejuvenated, motivated, ending the year in a strong spot and making a push for the NFL playoffs. And that's the discussion here. If you want to make the playoffs, I believe a late bye helps you, not only for that rest, recovery, and able to kind of reset and refocus in, but the statistics and probabilities support that. In 2023, teams with late byes were slightly more likely to make the playoffs, 58% compared to 55%. Granted, very small, but I think 3% is pretty noteworthy if you're asking me. And it's due to the healthier rosters because when you get banged up, you get a lot, and you get healthier. Everyone's banged up late in the year, but when you have those 2 weeks of not having to get hit on a day-to-day basis or in a game, that will super, super helpful. And for the Dolphins specifically, it's huge for a potential reset. When you look at the Dolphins schedule, the 3 games leading up to your Week 12 bye are the 3 hardest games consecutively that you have without a question. Week 9 against the Ravens, Week 10 against the Bills, Week 11 against the Commanders, and then your bye week. I mean, there is a world where the Dolphins lose all 3 of those games. Now, all of them are being played at home or at a neutral site, so hopefully you'll be able to go 1-2 at worst in that 3-game stretch. You'd hope if you want to be a playoff contender. But let's just say the worst, you go 0-3. And if you still have a chance to make the playoffs even with going 0-3, you take a breather, take a deep breath, come back out of the bye week against the Saints, motivated, ready to go, with an easier stretch of your schedule in the final 6 or 7 games of the year. I like the late bye week, but I want you to make the decision for me. Do you like the late bye? Type L if you do like, type D if you do not like. I am in favor of having a later bye. I would hate to have a Week 5 or Week 6 bye. That's just so early, and it just makes you exhausted going down the stretch. So I prefer the late bye week. All right, now I want to talk about the early part of the schedule because that is another thing that I find very favorable from the NFL. And I'm going to hone in on the first 8 games of the season. When you look at the first 8 games, there is just no way to me where you can expect or want anything worse than really 6-2. Like Colts Week 1, that should be a win. Week 2 against New England at home, hot 1 p.m. game, should be a win. I'll give you a loss in Buffalo, but returning back home on a massive big-time rest advantage against the Jets should be a win. Should be able to go to Carolina and win. Los Angeles is a toss-up. Atlanta's a toss-up, but you should easily be able to go into Cleveland and get a win when it's still semi-warm. It's a 1 p.m. game. Like, you should be able to go at worst 5-3, but ideally 6-2 in that stretch. You should be able to take advantage against the superior teams. I'll give you the loss in Buffalo. And if you go 1-1 against the Chargers and Falcons, it's a 6-2 start to the year. And you got to take advantage of that easy beginning because the last 9-game stretch is not as easy. As I mentioned, Ravens, Bills, Commanders, that's a gauntlet. But then you got games against the Saints and Jets to kind of make it easier. The last 4 games are tough, man. I think all 4 of those games could go either way. If you told me the Dolphins won any of those games, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me the Dolphins lost any of those games, I would not be shocked. So the last 4 games are tough. Week 13 and 14 should be wins, and that Week 9 to Week 11 stretch is kind of tough. So the last 9 games could go a lot of different ways, which is why you need to start the year off hot. Go 6-2, because if you start the year off 6-2, like I believe you should and can be, all that is required in the final 9 games of the year is to go 4-5. Go 4-5 in that this 9-game stretch here after starting 6-2. It's a 10-7 season, and you're probably in the playoffs as a wild card team. And that's kind of my final word of today's show. To me, I know it's a big if, and it sucks to say this, but if this team could stay healthy, and when I look at the players that are most important to stay healthy, I'm looking at Tua, I'm looking at Tyreek Hill, looking at Zach Sealer. Like, those are 4 of the most important guys on this team. If those guys are able to stay healthy for 15 of the 17 games, specifically Tua play all 17, like I think every quarterback should be able to do, you should be able to find your way into the playoffs with 10 wins. Because the schedule is in your favor. If Tua plays in all 17 games, I believe they go 10-7 and make the postseason. Maybe I'm drinking the juice. Maybe I'm a little optimistic right now. I know the major concerns in the secondary, but with this schedule, this high-octane offense, the improvements in the defensive line and offensive line, 10-7 should absolutely be in the cards, and let's hope that happens. And I'll be here every stretch of the way in the offseason, during the regular season, live for every Dolphins game, videos leading up to each week. We'll have you covered with everything you need to know surrounding the Miami Dolphins. So subscribe to the channel and join the family.